Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, transforming the way people think and work so their organizations can thrive. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and with me today is Randy Johnston. Randy has been a top-rated speaker in the technology industry for over 40 years. He was inducted into the Accounting Hall of Fame in 2011. He has been selected as a top 25 thought leader in accounting since 2011 as well. His influence throughout the accounting profession is highlighted once again by this year being a recipient of the Accounting Today Top 100 Most Influential People in Accounting, as he has been on that list since 2004. Among his many other awards, he holds the honor of being one of 9 technology stars in the U.S. by Accounting Technology Magazine. Welcome back to the Sage Advice Podcast, Randy Johnston.
Ed, it is such a pleasure to speak with you again and with all of your listeners as well.
And because you are what I like to call a recidivist guest, we will dispense with the normal opening question and just jump into talking about some things that are near and dear to both of our hearts. And first question I have for you is, what have we learned about the accounting profession in this crazy year of 2020?
Well, it certainly was not ready to go to stay-at-home mode, I think is true. There were a number of technologies that many organizations were not ready to work on. Remote documents with document management workflow was another issue. Even some fundamental things like remote voice with voice over IP wasn't in place. And then just managing people with collaborative tools was somewhat of a problematic thing as well. So when we made the jump, many people were not set up to work from home on an ongoing basis. It had been more of a temporary setup. And what I watched happened is people went from desperate to frantic as the year unfolded. So it was a very interesting time to manage through and try to help people keep their wits about them.
Interesting, though, a lot of them were able to make the transition, at least somewhat successfully. And because one of the things that I heard coming out of it was, the tax partner saying, well, there's no way we could ever work from home, ever. Well, then you did.
Then you did. Yeah, in fact, that was an interesting observation on this was if the work at home pandemic had occurred 10 years earlier or 15 years earlier, it would have been another thing entirely again. But because a lot of people were hosting their applications or running SaaS applications, they actually were in a position that they could work from home effectively, and they had all or most of their tools ready. So the other thing too is the internet speeds in our homes are much greater than they used to be. And so a lot of us had acceptable speeds in our homes. And so it didn't impact us too much. But having that family around, teaching them, their classes, if it was indeed school time, or having the spouse in the home was another big deal.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I have been saying is that our ability to even do what we did and lockdown's the wrong word and it's somewhat loaded, but let's just use it as the shorthand for what we've done, extreme work from home conditions, that we would not have been able to do it 10 years ago. It would not have been done 10 years ago. We would not have done what we did 10 years ago. And I think that's an example of the fabulous wealth and technology accomplishments that have happened.
Yes, in fact, I was amazed to watch Microsoft respond with their Azure ramp ups and their scaling up of Office 365 and Teams. And let's face it, many people use the new catchword Zooming, just like we talk about Xerox, and referring to copying. But, a web meeting, again, you think about those tools really almost being non-existent in a 10-year window. It would have changed the game in such a big way.
What about from a cultural standpoint? I mean, we're hitting from the technology, but I know you pay a lot of attention to the culture of firms. Have you seen any shift in the culture of firms as they've been really forced to adapt some of this technology?
Well, they've had a hard time managing the culture because what happened is the culture that existed was maintained a little bit, but maybe there were, let's say, meetings every week or two, and partners have been struggling with, how do we keep our team together when we're all working apart like that? So there have been attempts to run meetings remotely with large groups, and there have been attempts to communicate that way, but it's not very satisfying. So most people that I talk to are still looking for the best way to maintain the culture. Further, there's been recruitment, new people have been onboarded, but again, they're not getting the typical orientation when they're working from afar that they might have gotten inside the office itself. But on the other
Yeah.
hand, you alluded to it earlier, Ed. Hey, we didn't think it was possible to work from home, and poof, all of a sudden it is. So I'm not one of those that says we're going to have this whole new normal where everybody just works from home all the time. But I can tell you that I redesigned offices for firms that had contracts with architects for a new building. And we redesigned the building once this hit because they realized, we always thought you had to work in the office. And in fact, you can probably work from home.
Yeah, often quipped I wouldn't want to be in commercial real estate.
No, and the numbers are kind of panning that out as well, just like used car purchases are through the roof because, frankly, people didn't want to get back on mass transit. So let's get a car.
Yeah. Let's shift over to innovation. One of the things that you mentioned to me before you started recording is that there's been, um, I wouldn't say a downgrading of innovation, but just a shift in innovation from true innovation to really solidifying what it is technology partners were trying to do. Expand on that.
Yes, in this case, there were a lot of products that were in the pipelines being developed, but they maybe had not quite made it to market. Or on the other extreme end, there were products that were in the marketplace that weren't really completely baked yet. So the developers wound up tuning up these applications to make them a little more remote friendly, a little more feature complete, and along the way, then they were working on what they really did well. So they got their marketing messaging right while they got their engineering builds right. And where normally we'd see a lot of new products and we'd see them announced at shows, obviously, most of the live conferences, even like we do with our K2 group, have converted to virtual. And instead of being able to learn about things, which, there's some gnarling of teeth around conferences, oh, they're not very productive. All of a sudden, people realized, we actually do learn things from these live conferences. We get some of the information from virtual conferences, but not the same. And so the vendors, all who are delivering these products, also had a hard time getting a stage or a platform to convey what was new.
Yeah, I think what, and we always sort of knew this, but it's really been reinforced that while the formal presentations at conferences were important, it was really those cocktail parties, those going out to dinner, where those in-depth conversations were able to be had, where so much of the knowledge was then transferred because you'd go out to dinner then with somebody else the next night and talk about what you talked about the night before, right? And that's how some of it was disseminated, not truly at the sessions.
That's exactly right. In fact, it is that personal relationship. And the video meeting technology has maintained some of that, and you can do multi way. But frankly, it is that extended conversation because sometimes you are focused on a topic, but at other times you just needed a little bit of time to let your mind wander and then come back to it. So if you think about a natural conversation that you might have over dinner, you might be solving a particular problem. And sometimes it might be a few weeks after that before it hits you. Oh, that was a really good idea. And it changes your strategy. And one of those types of conversations, frankly, that I did have before the pandemic was about independence because the consulting relationships that we might be looking for, where we can get a truly independent advisor, so that's not quite as common as it was. And I think what happens when you're not in a public forum, you're having that dinner conversation, you really can cut pretty much to the chase. If you think about our relationship through the years, when we're not being recorded, we have a completely different conversation. Not that we're not honest with each other all the time anyway, but the net is we'll talk about things that we don't really consider public space, if you will.
Hmm.
So when it comes to a product, oh yeah, that feature doesn't work. Ooh, this
Mm.
is ugly. Uh, Avoid this because of these reasons. You can say that in a conversation one on one. And you and I both know a lot of different products and frankly have talked about a lot of different products through the years. But pretty much all the products have great things that they do, and pretty much all of them have niggles, as the British would say, right? Little stuff that just doesn't quite work.
Right. Right. Sure. Well, we only have a few minutes left here. I wanted to ask you, just because it's been on a resurgence lately, and it's something that I know you've thought about. What do you think's happening with Bitcoin? Are we going through another bubble, or is this time it's going to be real and stay where we're seeing?
Well, I think it may actually stay real. And there's three or four indicators that tell me that's probably true. First, I like fiat backed currency, stable coin type of environments, but I'm also fine with entire cryptocurrency ecosystems. But the key here is that we have reporting mechanisms that allow us to report to regulators as need be, as indicated by the U.S. tax returns and the reporting tools that are there, the Luca taxes and the gildeds and all those types of products. On the other extreme, we also have much more of the clearinghouses, the Verities, and those class of products that tell me that we're going to see integrations down at the accounting software level. And instead of things transferring in a local currency, US currency or British sterling pound or whatever, that it's actually getting transacted in some sort of a cryptocurrency. And that to me is the tipping point that will occur. Further, the standards are pretty well worked out at this point, and we have a lot less conversation about what a blockchain is as opposed to what the business solution is. What's the business need and how do we solve it? And whenever I hear that, I know we're past that initial wave of euphoria with the new technology, and we're getting down to business and solving.
Right, right. What is a blockchain doesn't matter anymore, right? And it was
Yes, in fact, you and I talked about that. It's like, what's an SSL or,
right.
what's an encryption and so forth. And, when we were dealing with those early technologies, you did want to get at least enough a drift of what it did for you. But when everything was said and done, it was really just a matter of it becomes invisible when it's working right. And we also are seeing that happen with a lot of the blockchains and a lot of the cryptocurrencies. They're becoming invisible.
Well, Randy, we always have an exit question that we ask all of our guests, regardless of how many times they've been on. And the question is, who is a hero of yours and why are they a hero? And you can answer the same or different.
Well, as a matter of fact, that one's pretty easy. Um, I have a background in natural science, as you know. I'm actually a light physicist. So a lot of people don't know that about me, but I actually have this nice physics and light and engineering background. And so somebody that I think just is fun to listen to, insightful, is Neil deGrasse Tyson. I read his most recent book, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. And if you have not read that, I recommend it to you highly because there's all sorts of insightful things that you learn in his book. And it's a quick read, probably less than an hour. But for example, the idea that we talk about tinfoil hats. And you're probably young enough, Ed, you don't remember that we actually had tinfoil before aluminum foil. I remember tinfoil, okay? And in effect, in the late 50s and 60s, people would put tinfoil hats on because they were afraid of radiation from outer space. It was a weird thing, but if you go back to Sputnik and you got to see the Sputnik go overhead, some things that are new like that sometimes cause you fear. Well, Neil just explains all sorts of scientific things in very simplistic language, but he's got the depth of knowledge behind it. So, when he says it's so, you can pretty much count on it being so. It's just like you and I might talk about accounting software, or in your case, value pricing, or in my case, how a particular technology works. You can pretty much count that we've done the legwork to say, we're pretty sure it's so. The facts are the facts and the facts matter. And I think he does a good job of representing that.
All right. Randy Johnston, thanks once again for being a guest on the Sage Advice podcast.
Hey, Ed, great to talk with you and all of your listeners. We'll see you again soon.
Review and subscribe by searching your podcast player of choice for Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.